The next morning Goburou detection skill alerts him to the approach of some enemies. Thanks to his skill improving, he is now able to identify the race and general strength of an opponent he had outside. Goburou is confronted by a couple of elves who seem like they are going to be a real pain in the ass to deal with. They have a proposal to make, but the elves are being really high and mighty about it. They ask for help that their territory is about to be attacked by humans who wish to steal their treasure and want to have the goblins fight to help defend against the attack. In exchange they'll be provided high compensation. Goburou immediately thinks this is a good idea to help them since the compensation amounts to a couple of months' worth of food for the whole village. While that may be true, Goburou still refuses the request regardless. The elves are shocked that he would turn down what they thought was an unbeatable deal like this. But Goburou couldn't care less about their situation, and while he normally wouldn't be opposed to helping them out and thinks this is a problem between them, so he wants nothing to do with him. The elf is angered and nearly draws his sword on Goburou, but Goburou immediately uses his skill and brings the elf kneel before him with the immense pressure. After this, he grabs the elf leader's neck and tells him to call off the archers surrounding this place if he wishes to continue life longer, but either one of the archers attempts to fire an arrow into Goburou's head. Goburou immediately catches it with his teeth. The reason he turning down their offer partially because he's not in the mood to fight humans, but if they threaten his goblin village as well then he might reconsider teaming up with the elves. But he was already angry with the actions of the elves. Then he used legendary spear to make it clear that he could kill everyone here in a second if he wanted to. He let them go today. All the elves immediately make a hasty retreat. The next day Goburou comes across a gray slime. He defeats it with some fire magic and picks up its core so he can munch on it. After eating the slime, Goburou unlocks the abilities of physical damage resistance, fluid regeneration and auto-replication. Auto-replication is an ability that allows Goburou to create a copy of himself using any of his body fluids. He tests it out by using a drop of his blood and after a few seconds a mini Goburou was formed. He's able to share his senses with this miniature version of himself. He comes up with the idea to have clothes made for all the women he cares about with his blood mixed into the lining, so that it can act as a way to contact him if they are ever in trouble. The next day Goburou had one of his blood children keeping a lookout for any suspicious behavior, and it just so happened to see the elves approaching once more. But this time it looks like the leader has brought a whole army with him. It seems like he didn't learn his lesson last time, so Goburou is done with mercy for now. As the elves approach the entrance of the cave, they are immediately immobilized by Goburou's roar, after which he steps out and uses his webs to tie all of them up. The prisoners are all brought inside, where Goburou gives the leader one last chance to make it out of this by asking him why he came back here. The elf leader just keeps digging his grave deeper and declares that he will kill Goburou for wounding his pride. Some of the elf girls apologize for their leader's foolishness since they tried to talk him out of coming here, but he refused to listen to them at all. Since it's not entirely the troops' fault that their leader is an idiot, he decides that they will fight one-on-one mock battles against the goblins here, and all the elves that win their battles will be spared, although the leader is going to be killed no matter what. After that only 23 left. Only 6 were defeated, and Goburou may not have rigged the matches that all the male elves lost so that he would have the elf girls to himself. After that Goburou eats all the elf that lost and gaining some extra skills from them. When done, he addresses the surviving elf women and tells them that they all need to surrender their weapons and magic items because they are being held as prisoners now. The elf girls are shocked because they thought they would be set free if they won their mock battles, but Goburou isn't so kind as to forgive people who came here with the intent of killing him. Goburou is already thrusting in excitement since he believes he will finally get to go balls deep with some elf girls, but Goburou tell him no touch rule again so the elves won't have to worry about any other goblins. Goburou can accept it since Goburou is the boss in the village, but Goburou still asks if he can get some action since he's so excited. Goburou feels kind of bad for him. Goburou still has to execute the elf leader and he's got something special planned for him. Later on Goburou reaches level 100 while out hunting, and as a result he evolves into a more powerful version of himself. The rest of the goblins are in shock of his new physique, especially Goburou, who is glad he has someone on his level once more. Goburou has become a special variant as well. His iron-hard crimson skin is a result of blessings from the demigod of flame and war, so he's become really tough. The first thing he wants to do now that he has evolved are sparring with Goburou, to which Goburou is more than happy to take him up on that offer. Goburou is definitely able to take a few hits from Goburou, but ultimately he still lacks the skills and gets defeated fairly easily. Goburou may have won the battle, he is still impressed with Goburou for catching up to him in the first place. He's glad he has a rival to keep him on his toes. Afterward, Goburou feels exhausted from all the fighting he had done with Gobokachi, so he takes a break in the cave. Suddenly he is then approached by a shadow figure which apologizes for not being able to prepare more for him and gives him an unknown skill. Goburou wakes up and it turns out to have been a weird dream. He is still left wondering what it could have meant on Day 51. Gobmi drags Goburou over, so he can get a good look at all the progress the other goblins have been making while he wasn't paying attention. 4 more goblins have become hog-goblins, one has been assessed to have enough talent to become a mage, while another seems to have the talents necessary to become a cleric. This is Gobji and he promises to do his best to help the goblin community as much as possible. And in other news, Hobse got even hotter. She has evolved into a half-spell ward. She's got some markings on her body which reminds Goburou of the marks he has. They leave that discussion for later as Hobse can't hold to test out how much extra power she has gained from her evolution. They both head outside where Hobse cast a volley of flame spells which set the forest ablaze. The two ignore the forest which is on fire. They just started and Hobse says she feels like she could cast another 20 times more just like that. But before she can cause any more collateral damage, Goburou says that's enough for today. With her being a half-spell lord, she isn't as strong as she would be his full spell lord, but she is likely going to evolve into one next time. To celebrate her evolution, Goburou presents her with some new legendary gear. The rate at which goblins have been evolving seems really high compared to how it normally goes. Goburou is mostly certain that it's because of his influence on how the way the goblins train, but even though the general population has grown stronger, but there are still those who aren't able to keep up. Later on, Goburou and Gobokichi are returning from a successful hunt, when they run into a group of the older generation goblins. They say they have had enough of living in the goblin village since they are the older ones. But all the goblins that are younger are getting stronger than them, and on top of that, Goburou is the only one who ever gets laid. So they want to leave and start something new for themselves. They surprise Goburou has no issues with them leaving, since they didn't steal any stuff. He even goes out of his way to provide them with a knife made of mithril to help them with their journey. The next day, Goburou came across an orc who is dragging a human body. The guy is already dead, so there's nothing Goburou could do to save him. He kills the orc to avenge him, and while he may have a rule against killing humans unless absolutely necessary, he still takes a bite out of the dead guy to see what skill he gets. He manages to acquire a monster tamer skill from him. Back in village, he was informed that the alchemist woman had succeeded in making the sake he asked for. Goburou was very happy about it. After that, Goburou told them that there were several groups of goblins leaving the village. He also invited the others if they wanted to leave too. However, it seemed like the rest of them wanted to stay in the village. Hearing that, Goburou happy and they celebrate the day. Later, Goburou is working on an idea to make earrings with his blood and give them all, so he can communicate with others. The next day, once the earring are completed, Goburou talks to Gobmi through the earring and she is amazed that she can actually hear him loud and clear. So with confirmation that the idea works, he made enough for all the goblins to use. As the day progressed, hunting went on as usual and Gob seems to have gotten a lot stronger, since she is now able to knock out a treehorn in one blow. Since the treehorn is still in one piece, Goburou thinks this is a perfect subject to try out his new monster tamer skill on, and once he's done, a treehorn is made into a loyal pet for Gob. After that, he goes on to tame a lot more animals over. Some of animal he made as guards for his women. On the 59th day, Goburou sets things up so that the red-haired girl can train by fighting kobold one-on-one. She sits down for a break with Goburou, and as he is eating, she asks if she would have a bit of his meat. Goburou doesn't mind and hands her the drumstick, but as she takes a bite from it, she pauses for a moment because she just unlocked a new job class. Her job is called Nor Soldat and it gives her boosts for a moment that allow her to move more agile. But instead that she needs to eat monster meat occasionally or she will die. Afterward, the cleric informs Goburou that some humans have attacked the goblin. Goburou thinks it's time to take some act. That night, Goburou is woken up when his detection skill alerts him to dozens of kobold heading this way. They are being chased by something, but he can't tell what is, so for now he has all the goblins ready to defend against whatever threat may be coming, and tells them to leave the kobold alone since they are the victims in this case. As the kobold run past them, it is revealed that they were being chased by magically animated skeletons. So Goburou ordered Gobmi and her team to open fire. They do as instructed, but the arrows have no effect on the skeletons. At this rate, they are going to end up getting overrun. There is clearly something creating these skeletons, so they'll need to take it out if they want this to end. But for now, Goburou tells everyone to drop their weapons and throw hands because smashing the skeletons is the only way to slow them down. Smashing the skeleton works, but they can't keep this up forever. The skeletons don't stop coming, and this is where Goburou comes in, because he is going after the one creating the skeletons. He dashes for the entrance while ripping through the skeleton in front of him. After only 7 seconds he finally gets to the skeleton general that is summoning the rest of the skeleton and punches a hole through it. Once the main skeleton has been defeated, Goburou takes a bite out of its head, which gives him a bunch of new undead skills. As he returns to the cave, he is greeted by all the kobold, who have now started referring to him as their lord. The kobold were out mining when they accidentally dug into Velvet's treasury and set off its guardian, a greater skeleton. So the only thing they could think of to survive was to run for the cave of the terrifying ogre. They've been trying to avoid their story about ogre. Goburou reminds them that he has been killing a lot of their kind for a while, so are they really sure they still want him as their lord? The kobold are fully aware and want to serve him. Regardless, at this point Goburou has gathered humans, elves and kobolds, so while he didn't intend for it first, he admits that things have gotten pretty interesting around here. The next day Goburou went out hunting with Gobokachi for the first time in a while. But as they were heading into the forest, they spotted a team of 12 humans moving through the forest quickly. Goburou changed plans and decided that they should follow them. They chase after the humans quietly, and by eavesdropping, Goburou is able to learn that the humans are planning to kidnap the daughter of the elf chief. Their target is the group of elves that will be returning from a festival today, and they got the necessary information from Trader among the elf tribe. 2 hours after sunset the convoy arrives. Goburou is stunning by how beautiful the elf princess, but then the human attack begins. 2 elves of the convoy immediately get headshot. Gobokachi wants to go help them, but Goburou stops him, since this fight has nothing to do with him. The humans then proceed to take the elves down, and when they finally grab the princess, Goburou changed his mind and decides to save them. After taking down the humans, Goburou and Gobokachi grab all the bodies of the survivors and carry them back to the cave, where one of the capture humans confesses everything he knows so that Goburou will spare him. The rest is eaten by Goburou to get new skills that can be used. Then he turns to Elf Princess, who had just woken up. She is scared the first time she sees Goburou. The princess seems to be a bit different from the other elves since she has wings. She is confused about everything that happened, so he tries to calm her down by saying he will not hurt her. After Goburou clears up the misunderstanding, he sits down and have some tea with the princess. She's why pissed that Goburou just hid in the bushes and watch her men get killed before deciding to do anything. Goburou does not care. He doesn't like getting involved in quarrels between the humans and goblins. He said there are traitors among her people who ratted out her location. The news that some of her people may be traitors only makes her cry even more. Goburou tells her to get some rest for tonight, and in the morning they'll escort her back to her tribe. On a side note, Gobji is still excited, heard there was a beautiful elf. But as usual, Goburou doesn't allow it near the elf princess. The next morning Goburou leaves early to escort the princess back to the elf tribe, and while they are walking, he asks about her wing. The princess told that they are something only high elves have. This is an evolved version of an elf who is able to fly with the wings. Although the princess says the wings are usually hidden within their bodies so outsiders don't see them often. After that they continue walking for another 3 hours until they finally reach the elf village. They are immediately held an arrow point by dozens of elves in the trees. These guys aren't messy around because their arrows are made of mithril and would be a serious threat to Goburou. The elf princess steps up and tells the archers to back off since Goburou are the ones who saved her. After that they allowed to meet with the village chief. The chief thanks for saving his daughter since she's the most important thing to him, but Goburou cuts straight to the chase and says he didn't save her out of kindness or anything. Village chief believes it's fitting to reward the man who returned his daughter to him safely, so he calls for an attendant to bring over a magic item. The item is called Failnot and it is an heirloom of the elf family. The princess asks if he is sure he really wants to give that up. He believes is decent compensation for saving his daughter. Goburou is glad to see that the elf chief not cunning person when it comes to things that matter, so he tells the chief that he has some information that may be useful regarding the upcoming war with the humans. Upon hearing this, the chief realizes that this may be a mutually beneficial relationship he is going with Goburou. As additional compensation, Goburou is given some mithril materials weapons which probably do something special after the deal was made. The chief says he has something he wants to ask about. The elite troop of elves went out and he hasn't heard back from them for long. So he was wondering if Goburou knew anything about that. Goburou knows who the chief is referring to, but since he already killed and eaten most of the team, he nervously laughs while denying any involvement with him. The chief has no reason to believe Goburou is lying, so he accepts what he says. But before they leave he gives Goburou an extra gift, several barrels of alcohol, and that was all Goburou needed to be willing to help them out if they are ever in trouble again. Back at the cave, Goburou is really enjoying the alcohol, so he intends to do everything to help. The others are glad to see that he is happy, but Gobmi feels something off about herself today. By the next morning, Goburou gets out of bed and he tries waking Gobmi up. He finds that she has evolved into a damper overnight. Some goblins evolve into hobgoblins. After getting herself a new change of clothes, she's finally able to show off to Goburou with her evolution. In other news, Gob evolved too and became a half-Earth Lord with abilities that allow her to manipulate Earth's spot weaknesses. Hobsato also evolved, but in her case she's become a half-Blood Lord. She's able to control blood and use it as a weapon. Goburou is still a bit curious about how they have the same kinds of marks on their bodies that he does. Gobji decides to rename them. So now Hobse will be known as Spelse. Hobsato become Blodsato. Gobmi as Dami and Gob as Earth. He also renames Gobikichi as Ogrekichi, Gobji as Hobji, and Goburou become Ogro. With the new evolutions, the chart of the most powerful races in the cave has been updated and Dami is at the top of the list right now. Once the war with the humans begins, the elves will turn to Goburou for help. When that time comes, having subordinates at his disposal will allow him to engage in more tactical operations. He began to distribute more of his communication earrings among the different species. But when it came to the elves, they were unwilling to put anything on. But Goburou did it his way to get the elves to agree, and his usually soundproof room was put to good use. With everyone now on board with the training, the size of the daily training group has grown rather large. Goburou came up with an idea to have them all fighting in controlled matches with an undead he creates, so they all can gain some experience. The skeleton he summons has dark bones and heavy armor, which indicates that it is powerful based on the equipment it spawns. With all the elves end up losing to the skeleton in battle. By using a little mana, Goburou can create various dark warriors, but unfortunately he can't eat the ghosts he created because they don't have a physical form. The undead were useful as training dummies, but the fact that they burn up as soon as they are exposed to sunlight really doesn't leave many options on how to use them during the day. For now, Goburou is focusing his efforts on training the elves and kobold to improve their skills, especially the kobold, since they are currently pretty low on the power scaling board. So if they don't get their act together, it's going to be hard for them to keep up. The next day he ordered Earth to close the cave where the kobolds found the undead, so they wouldn't cause any more trouble. After that, kobold practiced group hunting, and honestly they did a lot better than he expected. They managed to catch 20 wolves in one session. Goburou were able to tame them with his skill. Not wanting to be left behind, Earthy also showed his strength by hitting the stomp boar with bare hand. After returning to the cave, Goburou was pleasantly surprised to find that his axe that was damaged in the fight against the red bear has been upgraded. The entire thing. It has been modified with all kinds of metal alloys and spirit stones, so Goburou is really impressed with her work. He asked when she learned how to make stuff like this, so she explains that she recently ranked up to an elemental smith, and for her achievement she wants a special reward from Goburou. The next day they were meant to go out hunting for some stomp boar. Ogrekichi has something important he wants to discuss with Goburou. He asks Goburou to swear not to laugh at him. He has always had a crush on Earthy, and now that she's become an Earth Lord, that voluptuous body is making him feel some type of way. However, he has no idea how to talk to her, so he really needs Goburou help with this one and feels like his time has finally come to be a big brother. Goburou tell him to do it tonight. There's no point in leaving it for later, and if he ends up getting rejected, and let him know how it goes with Earthy. That night Ogrekichi confesses his feeling to her. He want they could happy together. Earthy also has the same feelings for Ogrekichi. Ogrekichi became excited hearing it. Next morning Ogrekichi is sparring with Goburou again, and today he's feeling a lot lighter than before and is much happier. All thanks to Goburou advice, which turned out to be with Dami's help to help him. Ogrekichi also goes through his days with enthusiasm and full of energy. After training as usual, they head out to begin hunting today. There are a bunch of new insect monsters that Goburou had never seen before. He wanted to gather as many as possible to help make some armor plating. He also eats some as well and is able to acquire the skill of exoskeleton, so he tries it out and his body is immediately covered in really tough armor. It holds up well against strikes and it repairs minor damage quickly as well, so it would be really useful in battle, but he doesn't like how obvious it looks, so he takes it off. Unfortunately, it looks like the armor was created using his clothes, so that jacket is just gone now, but this also teaches Goburou that he is able to register and recall forms that may be useful to him. After getting some new pants, he creates an aerial form using some beetle skills he had acquired, and with it he is now able to fly, although it's going to take some practice before he is really good at it. Before the day ended, Goburou ate the prey he had caught earlier and made soup, and he also got some skill. The following day it rained, so no one could go out at all. However, that didn't stop the redhead from asking Goburou to train with her. He used to think of her as a cute puppy, but now she's more like a Doberman. With how powerful she has become after training, Goburou headed over to the blacksmith to see how things are going on her. Lately she's been working with the elves to develop more interesting weapons with mithril. For example, she developed a new rapid-fire crossbow, and he is really impressed with the work she has put in. After that, Goburou went to go check on the chef's sisters. Their skills have improved as well, so Goburou attempts to get them to recreate some foods from his past life like potato chips. The sisters are more than happy to try anything he suggests. Next up on his checklist is a check-in with the alchemist to see how her research on potions and magic tools is going. She seems to have created a magic item that can freeze a person in place if they are hit with it, and she's really proud of her creation. So she wants a reward from him. However, the other girls catch wind of this reward, so Goburou has to spend the entire night with them. The next day Goburou gets called because there are some strange elves at the entrance to the cave, so he heads out and meets this elf who asks to have chat with him. He's here to ask for Goburou assistance because the human army is advancing into the forest, and since he is being much nicer than the last guy, the compensation is bound to be worthwhile, so Goburou accepts the request. Later he gathers all the strongest forces he has at his disposal and tells them that from this day forward they are now mercenary group and they shall be called the Parabellum Mercenary Company. So it was time for them to head out on their first job early in the morning. On day 71, they all head out on their first official mission as Parabellum, and for the special occasion, Goburou decided to have 36 of them to go. With Spellsay ability, they were also able to bring alone their familiars. So in reality there are more like 73 attackers in this group. The reason they made their move so early in the morning is because one of Goburou Blood's scouts managed to locate a human army encampment, so that would be their primary target for today. The group arrives at the encampment and they come across a barrier that has been detected around the camp. It is made to keep all monsters out. Spellsay suggests that they destroy it immediately so they can begin their attacks to that. Goburou orders everyone to get into position and surround the barrier in preparation for their attack. He uses his gauntlet to fire an arrow which shatters the barrier in an instant. All the human soldiers are left in a state of confusion after they witness their protective barrier crumbled to pieces. Earthy creates a rock wall to prevent them from escaping, and now that the humans are trapped, Dami and Spellsay attack them with powerful magic attacks. Just to be really sure that every human here dies, Goburou summons his skeleton soldiers and begins spamming his anti-barrier arrows at the soldiers. However, even with the insane number of attacks that they were just hit with, human side isn't simply going to give up easily. They launch their own counterattack and take down a few of the skeletons. Goburou first spots the female knight commander for the humans, and he is already considering having her join his army if he gets the chance. But before any of that, he wanted to greet her. Goburou lets out a loud roar to draw all attention to him. Once they met, Commander spots Goburou and orders her troops to concentrate their attacks on him, since he is the one controlling the army of undead. Her troops then begin making a path for her to get to Goburou. She charges forward using his buff skill that allow her to move through the undead soldier quickly. Goburou realizes the commander has good situational awareness and her decision-making skills aren't bad either, since she's trying to go straight for Goburou heart. Although that doesn't mean the attack will work on him though, the knight commander is repelled and thrown several feet back into the arms of her troops. After everything he has seen from her, Goburou has made the decision that she will be a fine addition to his harem. So he is going to capture her alive rather than simply kill her. She states that she will kill him instead. Her fiery spirit just makes Goburou like her even more. The commander realized that there's no point in arguing with words over this, so she tells Goburou to fight her, and if he manages to beat her then she gives him permission to do whatever he wants with her. Before he starts, he gives orders to his team to not kill the skilled members of the commander's special unit, because they may be useful later on. They're free to kill or eat anyone else. Though in the following minutes a massacre of horrific proportions took place. It's already pretty much expected that no one will be able to compete with Ogrekichi in terms of strength. But then we see Dami using her bewitchment spell, and even she is scared by the power she possesses. One look at her eyes and all the soldiers become her slave, who are willing to kill anything that moves for her, including themselves. Once a good number of the soldiers are already dead, meanwhile Bloodsato steps in and steals their blood to make weapons that will be used to kill even more soldiers. So the battle ended in a pretty one-sided victory. But back on Goburou, the commander's sword actually managed to touch him. It's an insignificant wound and it won't do much to help her win this battle. But it is still impressive to him that a human lead managed to touch him at all. Just then the commander's mage executes the kamikaze option since this battle is an obvious loss, so he casts a Flameways dragon spell which even Goburou would probably not be able to withstand if he took a head-on. The commander already knows this battle is hopeless, so she is prepared to let herself die if it means that Goburou will be taken down as well. However, as the spell approaches, Goburou pulls her out of the way and says he won't be letting her throw her life away, so he turns his back to the flame dragon spell and casts several layers of shields in rapid succession with varying effects. It's not a perfect technique, but it was effective in neutralizing the dragon. So the results of this battle come out as an overwhelming victory for Parabellum. He is really proud of himself for managing to capture such a skilled swordswoman, so he's going to make sure to put her sword handling skills to good use later. After that, he got a ton of skill from that fight. A while later, the elf chief shows up at Goburou cave with the wine. Goburou likes so much, and a party was held between the elves and goblins to celebrate the halting of the human army. Since his own troops were late to respond to the human forces, the chief decided it would be fitting to bring alcohol, so they can at least celebrate the victory. Goburou has no complaints since he gets to drink even more savory wine. But while the party was still going on, he went to the back of the cave to see how his prisoners are holding up. The two women he brought back seem to be just about ready to give in him. He may have done a little bit of aphrodisiac drugging to make them more cooperative, but Goburou gave up things like morality a long time ago, so anything goes as long as he gets new additions to his harem. That night, Commander tries to hold out by saying she's a noble woman, so she would never allow herself to breed with an ogre. By the next day, Goburou sat down with the commander and put one of his communication earrings on her, and with its effects she wasn't able to lie to him at all. So he managed to gather a lot of really useful information about the human army. Not for his sake, but rather because the elf elder doesn't want to have to be relying on Goburou so often. Since this is a problem that the elves ultimately need to deal with on their own, which is why he offered to buy any information Goburou is able to get from his prisoners. He offers Goburou 10 more barrels of wine as payment, and Goburou can never say no to good wine. After acquiring the information from the Knight Commander, he relayed everything to the elf elder through his communication bracelet. He informs them that the humans are planning to ambush the elf village from 3 separate directions to overwhelm their forces. So on the day that the attack is meant to take place, Goburou and Ogrekichi got there early to lay out a bunch of traps, and then they just waited for the humans to arrive. As they spotted 500 soldiers marching along the path, Goburou gave the signal for the road to block off with trees. And after that, the rest of the goblins proceed to roll boulders down on top of them, instantly cutting their numbers down to 300. Then Dami Long Range started their rain of arrows, which further diminished the number of soldiers till they were below 100. However, it was at this point that the commanding knight realized that they were at a disadvantage, so he ordered his surviving troops to build a wall with all the rocks and dead bodies they can find, and after hunkering down, they managed to fight back against the goblins until it became a stalemate. Goburou was impressed by the intelligence of the commanding knight, so he asks Ogrekichi to charge down there himself and see if he can capture the commanding knight alive. Ogrekichi charges down there, and inside the makeshift fortress, he starts fighting with the Knight Commander. The knight gets knocked back, but even in the face of Ogrekichi's overwhelming strength, he was still able to smile. Ogrekichi tries to strike him down, but the knight ducks under and encounters with a strike of his own, forcing Ogrekichi to have to go on the defensive. Goburou has been watching this whole thing, and for once he actually seems to be interested in the ability of the Knight Commander. After that, Ogrekichi eventually knocks him out anyway. They are done with their mission now, so Goburou plans to report their victory to the elf elder and return to base. After eating the corpses as usual, but once he is done with that, Dami comes up to him and asks for some special baby treatment tonight, which Goburou is happy to provide. The next day, the prisoners of war are all held in the cell together, and 2 other guys are lamenting over the humiliation of their situation. The red-hair commander tells them to shut up since this place isn't actually that bad, considering they get good food and a place to stay. They don't agree with the sentiment, but while the other guys were nobles, the redhead was a commoner, so this is actually better in the way he got treated back in the human kingdom. Later on, Goburou questions the redhead on the reason why the human kingdom chose to invade the elves. He explains that the princess of one of the human lands fell ill with a disease that has a 99% fatality rate, but she was set to get married to the emperor. So the emperor ordered a nationwide search for a cure for this disease. Eventually they heard of a medicine that could cure all diseases, but it could only be found in the elf village. So naturally the next logical step was to invade them without trying to negotiate. Goburou now understands the reason why war started, and it all boils down to human greed. Although he kind of understands the human's point of view since he was once human himself. At the same moment, Earthy was busy mining to expand the cave, but after that, she in a crack, a lot of water suddenly started pouring out of the cave and onto the floor. Everyone rushes in to check on her and see if she's hurt, but it turns out they just hit a pocket of water in the caves. Goburou knows exactly what to do with it. After a few short hours of work, Goburou has completed construction on the first ever goblin cave bathhouse. Immediately after it is complete, everyone takes a break to have a soak inside the relaxing bath. The next day, Goburou had an idea to improve the fighting capabilities of his troops, so he brought out the soldiers he had captured and set them up to train alongside his own men. Those who are less experienced should be able to learn a lot quicker by watching how an actual trained soldier would perform the task. So a simulated war was fought with Dami and Spelly as the commanders and a mix of the different species as the soldiers. But on the other hand, Hobsato and Obrakuchi does not like tactics that involve thinking. As the day's training continued, the nobleman prisoners got tired, but the redhead was still full of energy, so he goes up to Goburou and asks to have a match with him. Goburou admires the spirit of the young man, so he agrees to fight him. But to make sure he doesn't accidentally punch his body to pieces, he gives him a few buffs to enhance his strength and durability. After doing this, they gets ready and begins his fight, but it seems like Goburou can win easily. When fight is over, Goburou begins healing him so he doesn't stay paralyzed. And while he's doing this, Obrakichi comes running up to him and asks to fight Redhead next. Redhead seemed to like the idea as well, since a few moments later he is fighting Obrakichi with a smile on his face and he seems to be holding his ground a lot better. After training is done for the day, everyone sits down to eat lunch and Redhead is currently eating with Goburou. He mentions how he originally came from a land with a lot of demi-humans living there, so he can't understand why the nobles here hate demi-humans so much. Here all the races are able to live in harmony, and he can tell that Goburou is able to maintain order well. So he gets up and swears his loyalty to him. Goburou has a soft spot for diligent people like Redhead, so he releases him from being a prisoner and appoints him as the master of the other Redhead, so that he can train her in the ways of fighting like a human. He glad he added another skilled soldier to his ranks, but the other noblemen aren't really worth keeping, so he asks the elf elder to take them off his hands. The elder agrees to take them before he goes. Goburou asks him about the special medicine that the humans were after, since he wants to know a bit more about it. But the elder tells him that it was already given to him as a gift when he brought back the elf princess. Goburou doesn't understand why he would give something as precious as this if he is willing to fight a war over it. But the elder just has a grudge against humans, so there's no reason he can't give it to someone like Goburou. Goburou then takes a sip of this mythical medicine, and with his ability he gains his skill for enhanced regeneration as well as the ability to make his blood into medicine. To test it out, he uses it on one of the injured commanders, and with a single drop all his wounds are instantly healed. So Goburou is left wondering if there is really no limit to how powerful he can get.